What do you think is the biggest scandal in human history? Plastic is good for the environment because it is recyclable. I have been reconsidering plastics since reading about microplastics found in the human body. Brain everywhere, all Earth environments. I now think of plastics as very dangerous. Wait until you hear about all the toxic additives in plastics that aren't covalently bonded, resulting in them leaching into everything. All this has been known since the 1990s. My dad would always tell us to avoid plastics and to not use plastic or foam plates, bowls in the microwave. He always wanted us to use glass or porcelain. I don't know why the media did not write about all this at that time, almost 30 years ago now. Admittedly, the past few years have made me take an extremely dim view on humanity, but I am of an opinion that the majority of people aren't very bright. In fact, a large portion of population are downright morons, who have at great effort learned some survival strategies that tide them through life, but nothing more. These people are self-centered, short-term thinking, easily distracted, and not caring much for others. Not that they couldn't care for others, I'm not saying they're evil, but especially the extreme competitiveness of current economy consumes all their mental capacity and leaves them with nothing to ponder the wider world and further future. Newspapers and media have to sell. They have to appeal to a wider audience. Naturally, they're going to focus on more local, in time and space, issues, ideally with simple solutions. The more enlightened media that targets people with more available mental capacity has talked about it. That's how we know about it at all. A large portion of the population are downright morons. In the US, 54% of people can't read above a 6th grade reading levels, and 21% can't read above a 3rd grade reading level. Those numbers aren't combined for 75%. The 21% is included as part of the whole 54%. Anyways, for reference, what is considered a 6th grade reading level, you ask? These would be books like Holes, Harry Potter, and the Sorcerer's Stone, Where the Red Fern Grows, etc. Now for a 3rd grade reading level. We're talking about The Adventures of Paddington, Babe the Gallant Pig, Dog Man, etc. It's fucking terrifying in my opinion. In hindsight, every other option is infinitely easier to deal with on the back end. Paper products break down a lot quicker with way less environmental issues. Metal is far more easily recyclable and isn't dependent on type of metal. Glass can also be easily melted down or ground down back in sand with little no harm to the environment. Like, what we ever think with disposable plastics? That corporations wouldn't have to worry about the costs of cleanup. It used to be that they cleaned up a lot of the glass themselves. Then, they shifted to plastic and put the burden on consumers to save themselves money. It is always about money. The short-sighted answer to why we kill ourselves as long as the expected consequences are just far enough down the road. The petroleum industry had a lot of byproduct. They wanted to make money from that too. It really played into society's search for the easiest day-to-day possible. Tired of ironing cotton clothes? Tired of stained and worn clothing? Try polyester. Drape yourself in refined and restructured petroleum. Save a tree. Use plastic bags. They're lighter, they're stronger, they're better. Don't trust that tap water. It might have fluoride in it. Buy our all-natural purified drinking water in purely synthetic petro bottles. It's healthier. Aren't people gross? Don't let them touch things you might want. Wrap everything in pure, clean plastic. Then you don't have to wash it before you use it, and it's cheap. Plastic is so incredibly cheap because it is largely an industrial byproduct that would otherwise just be dumped into the ocean by the world's largest and most profitable companies. And everything is disposable now. Fast fashion, fast furniture, fast electronics. It's all meant to last a year or two. People can't be bothered to give a fuck if it might make their life just a teeny bit more difficult or inconvenient. The pharmaceutical giant Bayer sold a drug for hemophiliacs that ended being contaminated with HIV. Once learning of the contamination, instead of ceasing sales entirely, the company chose to only discontinue the drug in the US, where the evidence of the contamination and associated deaths had come from, and proceeded to market the product in Asia and Latin America. Many patients contracted HIV and ultimately died of AIDS because of this decision. To my knowledge, no one from Bayer has ever been prosecuted. Surprising because Bayer had such an honorable origin. Okay, go on. In the 20th century, they formed IIG Farben, later renamed IIG Auschwitz. They ran the human experimentation labs at Auschwitz concentration camp, using the prisoners as both test subjects and slave labor. They had about 160,000 slaves in their workforce. In one experiment on female prisoners, a Bayer employee wrote the following letter to Höss, the Auschwitz commandant. The price was 150 Reichsmark per person. They also developed Zyklon B, the gas used to exterminate Jews in the gas chambers. They had a track record here, having previously made chemical weapons for Germany to use in World War I. After the Nuremberg trials, some of their top executives went to prison. As soon as they were released, they were invited to resume their positions. Eventually, after the HIV scandal referred to in this post, Bayer decided to become one of the good guys, so merged with Monsanto. Bayer was part of a German chemical conglomerate called IG Farben, which produced a lot of weapons and materiel for the German army during both world wars. They developed the chemical weapons used in World War I. They also worked closely with the Nazis. The location for the Auschwitz concentration camp was chosen so that prisoners could be used to build a factory for IG Farben, and the company later opened their own concentration camp nearby. Bayer tested drugs on concentration camp prisoners as well. There were few, no consequences for company execs after the war. La Hellscartel by Diarmuid Jeffries is a great but depressing book about the history of IG Farben and their relationship with the German government. There was a process used to heat the plasma to make it safer. Cutter, owned by Bayer, told other countries it was selling them the heat-treated stuff while actually giving them the old contaminated plasma. When doctors in those countries started noticing outbreaks from this plasma, Cutter acted like nothing was wrong and it couldn't be from their safe plasma supply. Eventually, the FDA steps in. Not to actually punish anybody, but basically telling Cutter to stop selling contaminated blood before Congress or the media could find out. Cutter still continued to sell the contaminated blood for another 2 months after that. Well, I can't say much on human history due to how broad it is, so I can pinpoint on some points in history in the world of medicine. It's going to be the awarding of Nobel Prize of Antonio Egas Moniz, the proponent of lobotomy. Also, Andrew Wakefield, the guy who proposes that vaccine causes autism. The dude created fraudulent results. This guy single-handedly puts everyone in jeopardy. Fuck Wakefield Frar. The idiotic autism claims are their own absolute garbage fire. But not only that, he put the poorly educated on a fast track back to dying of preventable childhood diseases that devastated the world for centuries, all in a matter of a few years. Imagine if this fucktard wriggled his bullshit into the world before we eradicated smallpox. Signed, someone very angry in epidemiology. I remember watching H-Bomber Guy's deep dive on the vaccine scare for the first time and being absolutely baffled that the story didn't end with Andrew Jeremy Wakefield in prison. How is this level of malpractice and misinformation not highly illegal? Also, fuck Oprah and Dr. Phil for giving anti-vaxxers a platform for the masses at the start of the anti-vax movement. And it was all to sell snake oil enemas for what he claimed was an intermediary condition that doesn't even exist. He also wanted to sell his own MMR vaccine. He wasn't even actually anti-vax, just the main vaccine. Yes, this is the most infuriating part. He wanted people to pay him to have 3 separate vaccines instead of one combined one. Not to mention the vaccine autism lie just refuses to die. There is no way to convince people it's not true. And now we have the head of HHS that's a fucking nut job. I'm an autistic woman. I think even if vaccines did make me like this, I'd take it over preventable death. I still function. I work at a job I'm actually really good at. I've been to college. I attempted to enlist in the Navy. Washed out in boot camp due to bad luck with health and a particularly nasty case of norovirus. I'm considered somewhat of an expert in my job, even. It's nothing fancy or exciting. I'm a government mailroom clerk, but I'm good at sorting mail these days for the most part with just a look. Occasionally, we still get a couple things I have to ask for, but it's legal documents that could go to 3 different legal departments. Despite some minor issues with the autism and ADHD, I like my life. I function, I serve society, and my community through my job. I don't have the biggest, but I have the one that makes me laugh. In ancient Rome, Julius Caesar, as the head of Rome, had an enemy in the senator Cato. During a meeting when Cato was denouncing Caesar for being treasonous and many other things, a messenger came in and slipped Caesar a note, which Caesar read, supposedly smiling. Cato, thinking he had a gotcha moment, yelled something along the lines of, "See? He is so bold as to plot and conspire against us here in the Senate House. Read your letter aloud. It was a raunchy love letter from Cato's sister, who Caesar was having an affair with. It was read aloud in front of hundreds of the most powerful men in the entire republic, bailing out failed banking system and damning an entire generation to austerity. Could argue the events that lead up to said bank failure was a scandal as well. But when it emerged, they weren't subject to same rules as rest of business. It was a scandal. It was that or economic Armageddon. You'd be looking at a depression worse than the Great Depression if the whole thing had sunk. Letting it get to that point in the first place is the scandal. It's naive to think if the government had done nothing, it would have all worked out. The bailouts should have come with conditions that involved keeping people in their homes who had filed taxes and helped fund such bailouts, and the imprisonment in the worst federal prison in solitary confinement for the rest of their lives, the individuals in bank leadership who caused the mess to set an example. Any company that is too big to fail and gets to a point that they need a taxpayer-funded bailout should get nationalized. If it's so important to the people's well-being that that business continues its operations, then the people should own it. Banking systems are crucial in this age, to the point they should be considered critical infrastructure, like roads and water. Every government should have its own bank that it guarantees and provides a free account for every citizen with no fees. All other banks should be guaranteed by their respective owners, and if they fail, they get subsumed by the government bank, rather than bailed out. Holocaust. The idea of making human-killing factories is so surreal, my brain tries to protect me, and I'm not realizing what was really going on when thinking about it. So, instead of killing people in war or shooting them, they made slaughter machines, whole camps, to kill people as fast as possible. What the was that? 2 comments about this. The fact that there are people who still deny it happened is unbelievable. About Germans knowing, some definitely did, but the Nazis were smart, and most of the death camps were set up in other countries to avoid this. The amount of people who think the Holocaust is a myth, or aren't sure if it happened, is shockingly high, especially among young people. IDK if people are in denial or really are that ignorant, but it was never a question when I was in school. The erasure that's happening is extremely concerning, and I wouldn't be surprised if it was intentional. Of course it's intentional. If you don't believe it happened before, you won't believe it's happening till it's too late. There's also the fact the Holocaust didn't start with these. The original plan was deporting Jews. The Nazis kept pushing out and detaining Jews until all of their plans ran dry, including a plan to deport every Jew to Madagascar. The mass killing of Jews didn't really start until the Nazis invaded the USSR. The SS followed the army with the purpose of exterminating Jews by shooting them and burying them in mass graves. They had to follow a motto: 1 bullet, 1 Jew. If the Jew wasn't killed by the bullet, they were left to die in the mass graves. 1,500,000 Jews were killed and buried in mass graves in what is now Belarus and Ukraine. The only reason the Nazis stopped using this tactic of extermination is because of the psychological toll it was taking on the SS soldiers. So, the Nazis started using mobile gas chambers, which were enclosures behind vans. They'd put the Jews in enclosures and let the exhaust from the vans kill them. After that, Nazis primarily used the death camps. In total, 3 million plus Jews were killed in the camps, and the rest were killed by other means. The majority of the people on this thread who don't know what scandal means, or how long human history is. I was hoping to hear about some embarrassing event by an ancient king, yet this thread is full of conspiracy theories about recent American politics. The biggest scandal, and the oldest, is that no one on God's green earth has yet worked out how to stop the 5% or so of the human race from preying parasitically on the rest of us. As a result, we all need locks on our houses, businesses, cars, you name it, and passwords on our devices. We have parasites from pickpockets to dictators, from cybercriminals to Ponzi scheme promoters. We arrest some, we jail others, and nothing stops them. They are the scourge of our species, just as COVID was and whooping cough still is. The wide-ranging harm they cause is immeasurable. In the name of whatever supernatural entity you believe in, can someone please come up with a truly effective deterrent? Because I can't. Oil companies have data as early as the 1970s that their emissions were the primary driver of global climate change, and then covering up that data for decades. They knew that they were killing the environment and didn't care. Because profits. Maybe the Opium Wars, 1839 to 1860. The British Empire deliberately flooding China with opium, leading to mass addiction, all to maintain economic and colonial dominance. Or the colonial and slave trade atrocities, the transatlantic slave trade and European colonial exploitation of Africa, Asia, and the Americas shaped global inequality and caused suffering on an unimaginable scale. The Holocaust, or the generalized oppression of women and children, and also men who are poor, in every continent, every century. Or the concept of war, just in general. So many to pick out form. May not be the biggest scandal, but the renowned General Amherst of the Indian Wars during the time of Manifest Destiny, whites overrunning native lands, used to distribute blankets knowingly infected with smallpox because it would decimate the indigenous. IOW biological warfare, our debt-based monetary system. The biggest scam in the history of mankind with the biggest implications. We would all be living much more prosperous and safer lives. The few who understand the system will either be so interested in its profits or be so dependent upon its favors that there will be no opposition from that class, while on the other hand, the great body of people, mentally incapable of comprehending the tremendous advantage that capital derives from the system, will bear its burdens without complaint, and perhaps without even suspecting that the system is inimical to their interests. The Rothschild brothers of London writing to associates in New York, 1863. The affair of the diamond necklace was an incident in 1785 at the court of King Louis XVIII of France, involving his wife, Queen Marie Antoinette. The reputation of the queen, already tarnished by gossip, was ruined by the implication that she participated in a crime to defraud the crown jewelers of the cost of a very expensive diamond necklace. How the greatest democracy on earth gave up on intelligence for glam and things. How Americans not only closed their minds, they began to barricade the door. America doesn't even know itself now. You stopped reading. You stopped writing. You stopped doing things and allowed yourselves to be lulled into stupor by dopamine and greedy self-interest. You embraced cowardice and coat yourselves in fear. Your only hope now is deep diving into knowledge, going to libraries, learning your damn history. The 1534 Act of Supremacy that solidified Henry VIII as supreme head of the Church of England in order to break England from the Pope / Vatican was wild. The Pope wouldn't annul Henry's marriage to his wife so that he could marry Anne Boleyn to try for a legitimate male heir. The people loved his wife, Catherine, and now she was being made persona non grata, and on top of that, if you even whispered that Henry wasn't the head of the church or showed support for Rome, you were a traitor. And I think we all know how Henry treated those he saw as his enemies, no? Ah, those kooky royals. Probably the idea then a man owns a woman and controls her right to reproduction. It has existed in one form or another in all societies, and in some countries, it still exists today. Think ISIS. I have always been impressed with recent female leaders, and I wonder would a matriarchal society have been more peaceful and prosperous. That's not a scandal because the majority of people in the societies that believe that, believe it. Something bad does not equal scandal. One of the biggest scandals in human history has to be the Panama Papers leak in 2016. It exposed how world leaders, billionaires, celebrities, and corporations were hiding wealth in offshore tax havens. The scale was mind-blowing. 11.5 million documents revealing financial corruption on a global level. Politicians resigned, governments were shaken, and it confirmed what many already suspected. The ultra-rich play by different rules. And the craziest part? Hardly anyone faced real consequences. Thank you for watching. Write comments, put likes. Do not forget to watch other videos.